Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. Today we're going to talk about which Age of Sigmar miniatures will fit nicely on a square base and be used for my favourite game, Warhammer the Old World.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems and offer custom items to suit your club, your event or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description.
Why make this video? Well, firstly, it's a bit of fun, and secondly, I've been asked to do it a lot, to be honest with you, be that in comments over the last few years when I've used Age of Sigmar miniatures, and more recently I've been asked after I did the unboxing of the Dark Water set, and then I made a separate video about which of the miniatures could be used for Warhammer the Old World and how they might be used, and I had quite a few comments as there. People asking me, well, can you do one for the whole of the Age of Sigmar range? It's quite a big job, there's lots of stuff there, so we're going to whiz through it a little bit today, and I want your help as well. I'm going to miss loads and loads of stuff, so I want your own thoughts in the comments below. What miniatures have you used, or do you intend to use? How are you going to use them? It's also a time, I think, when we've got more and more people joining the game again. I'm seeing more and more comments of people saying, I'm ready to get into the game now. I'm starting to see new plastics coming into the ranges, and there's people returning to the game all the time. I've had new comments on videos like about rules and should I buy the rule book now? Is it updated? What's all the FAQ? So there's people still coming into the game that maybe played old fantasy and maybe just a little bit confused about the whole setup of what's a legacy army, what can be used and what's not. So I will briefly cover that off as well, but it's useful for people coming new to the game, coming back to the game and wondering where to find miniatures to use in the game if their own roster doesn't quite match what's available to buy new in terms of the old world of core armies. But most of all, this video is just for fun. If Age of Sigmar and Age of Sigmar miniatures make you a little hot under the collar, maybe this video isn't for you. I'm a big fan of Warhammer Fantasy. I'm not suggesting we replace that. I'm not suggesting any of these things are better. They are just alternatives and things that you may use to help you play the game where there may be gaps in the current range for Warhammer the Old World, or you might want something alternative. One final really important piece of information for people returning to the game now who've played Fantasy before and are looking at the factions that are listed on the Games Workshop website, and you'll see that your faction is missing. Some factions were legacied at launch of the game. Unfortunately, there were rules made for them. There are free PDF downloads in order to use your old armies, to use third-party miniatures, or to find what miniatures are left from those ranges within the Age of Sigmar range. They can be played, but that's why they're not there. And then this video becomes even more important in how do you start those armies without official miniatures being in the old world range for them. So let's head over to the Games Workshop website and start working our way through all the Age of Sigmar factions. I'm going to have to whiz through this at some pace, otherwise this video is going to be an hour long, and this is where you're going to come in with the comments and say, oh, you didn't mention this unit, they're brilliant for this, I've used them for that. But we're starting with Order and we're starting with Cities of Sigmar, and I think there's a lot in here that you'll recognise. So we've got the Battle Mages already there on the screen, and they were old fantasy miniatures, and if you don't want to buy some of the new resin ones, this is a brilliant kit and one that a lot of people will be using for their Empire armies, but using for Outcast Wizards as well. But you've also got a lot of the newer Age of Sigmar miniatures that are very, very suitable for conversion or to use. So you've got excellent Witch Hunter proxies there. You've got the old Luminarch miniature, which never got rules. It did in 8th edition, but doesn't exist in the current lore and timeline for Warhammer the Old World, but it still makes a fantastic basis for a war wagon or something like that. The Warrior Corpse Hunters even can be used as some kind of archers or something. Again, warrior priest options there. I love the Pontifex Zenestra miniature there. I think it can make a really nice converted Grail reliquary. Lots of conversions needed. Lots of bits trimming off and sticking on of Bretonnian bits from your spares. but it can look great, and it's something really, really different. Even things like the Talia Vedra miniature there just gives you a really nice alternative mount for some of your big heroes. And I quite like the Free Guild models. I don't like the shields. I think they're very Age of Sigmar, but if you use alternative shields and maybe change the helmets slightly, or even head swaps, you can then have some alternative Empire or some troops to use in your outcast armies, your renegade crowns, that kind of thing. And there are plenty of fun miniatures that you can use in alternative outcast wizards or magic users, be that the Free Gold Calls Command. There's some lovely character miniatures there that you can convert, and a lot of these I'm suggesting that you maybe make some changes to. The Alchemite Warforger there would be brilliant as an outcast wizard of a certain theme, but you can also use in your Chaos armies as well. And I love the Free Guild Cavaliers. I think there's a lot to trim off that's very Age of Sigmar, but would make some great Renegade Knights as well in your Renegade Crowns list. Now that's all quite human-y based stuff, but there's a lot left in the Cities of Sigmar range that is just pure old fantasy. And there's a lot of talk about whether this will be removed when Cities of Sigmar gets updated and we end up with maybe Dark Elves in the old world in the future. We're all keeping our fingers crossed for it, I'm sure. But you have got straight up Dark Elf miniatures here that were part of Cities of Sigmar when the game changed to Age of Sigmar, and you can see some of it here. They've not even rebased them for the artwork, so you've still got square based black guard there, but you got your chariots, you got your hydras, you got the Scourger chariots. Some of the chariots are newer, but you're definitely able to use them. Executioners, they're still on square bases. Charybdis, Assassins on a square base, and Sorceress on Black Dragon on a square base. Black Ark Corsairs on square bases. There's a bit of a theme here. The Sorceress, the Dreadlord on Dragon, loads and loads and loads of stuff that you're going to want if you're creating a Dark Elf army, which is a legacy army, which I mentioned right at the top of the video. If you're new coming back to this, you're going to need to dive in and buy your miniatures from the Age of Sigmar range. And the order's a bit off here because of where they placed their out of stock miniatures, but your Free Guild Cavalier Marshal, again, a really nice Renegade Lord if you want to do some conversion there. I think I love that miniature, definitely want to do something with it at some point. And you're back to more and more of the Dark Elf range. Funnily enough, straight up next is the Daughters of Khaine, which is basically your witch elves. And in many people's, maybe one of my theories of why we haven't seen Dark Elves in the old world is because of the link here with some of the old witch elves with Daughters of Khaine, and that maybe that's preventing the whole range from going over to the old world. Now, some of these are new miniatures, as you can see. Some of them are old miniatures that were on square bases before. I'm pretty sure the old Bloodrack Shrine or the Cauldron of Blood miniature was an 8th edition miniature. I may be misremembering things now. I'm getting old, and that was a good 10 years ago. We also have the Canary Life Takers here, and if you're a player of a faction that needs harpies, you'll know that there aren't any modern harpy miniatures. I don't know if they even brought back the old metal ones. I'm trying to remember. I don't think they did. So you're going to need some winged miniatures of this size, and they are perfect for it. So I'm sure people are using these already. If you need harpies, these are great, and they're also great if you need them for your Dark Elves as well. But as you can see, this is where all your Witch Elf stuff is. Some of it, I believe, is still old 8th edition stuff. The actual Witch Elves there are 8th edition. Some of it is updated, newer stuff as well for Age of Sigmar. But this is pretty much the rest of your Dark Elf faction. That's it. That's your key there. I'm not going to be talking about rules too much in this. If you want to play Dark Elves from an aesthetic point of view, you love Dark Elves, they're there. Go and buy them, put them on square bases and play them. I think that if you love Dark Elves, it's pretty much there. And I just really hope now that they get a big update. The Daughters of Khaine get a big update for Age of Sigmar, and the rest gets released back to the old world where it really, really belongs. Now we have Fyreslayers, which are basically slayers, and there is some use for some of these, though they do require a bit of work in my opinion, and the way I would like to field them. Again, if someone turned up in a game and just said, these are my slayers, I'm fine with that. I don't get too cross with that kind of stuff at all. It's someone's miniature, someone's hobby, very much their way. I've used some of these in an army I've started for a Slayer host, mainly for sort of elites and things like that. And there's some really, really nice options to use as your Brotherhood now, if you're looking for Brotherhood miniatures, because they don't exist. You've got Metal Slayers, which are really, really nice, but to then say that they're Brotherhood as well, it's very hard to paint them super differently as well, because they are semi-naked dwarves with big orange hair and beards. A lot of this you won't use. You're not going to use your Magudroth probably. You might not use Gottfried Gurnison even. He still makes a very, very cool Dragon Slayer or Demon Slayer anyway. But your standard Fyreslayer models are useful, but you might want to cover over some of the embedded rooms they have with a bit of green stuff, and it starts becoming a lot of work. If you don't like metal miniatures, they can be used, but some of the bling on them you might want to tone down by trimming off and swapping out weapons and stuff. It can end up being a lot of work. But there are options here, and I would say if you love these miniatures and you want to use them, you can make a really nice Slayer army out of them. You go ahead and do it. Don't listen to what anyone else would say. I've used some of the Flame Seekers, again, as some of the Brotherhood. They make good options for that. Now that we have the Slayer host list, I think it opens up some of this stuff a little bit more, just so you've got some alternatives. The Idoneth Deepkin, I've painted some of these as commissions for Age of Sigmar, some beautiful sculpts, and they're clearly elf based. They're clearly an elf faction, not like old elf factions. So you may well want something that's an entirely different aesthetic for a theme that you're trying to work on, or just replace some different miniatures somewhere and fill holes in ranges. And some will work as alternative high elves, some will work as alternative dark elves, and some will work really nicely as if you're looking for a sea elf theme, which we've not really seen really since the sort of the end of 3rd edition. That kind of stuff started to die off a little bit. You might not want to take whole miniatures. You might not want flying sharks on your tabletops, and some people won't like it at all. That's fine, but I do think there are some cool miniatures here. If you want to go for a Sea Elf themed list, you can look at something like the Ishran Tidecaster and convert that to a spellcaster. Perfect. There are good options here. Some of it is very dark elfish as well, so that's why I think they work really, really nicely for Sea Guardish themes to pick miniatures here and there, or dark elf themes, especially like your Namatari Reavers there. They're very dark elfish. I'm sure you'll be able to have some alternative use for those. Just fun things really. The Lowtown Warder of Soul Edges, again, a nice Sea Guard based mage there would be perfect. Just alternatives to what is a relatively restricted range at the moment for Warhammer the Old World. Lots of things that you can sort of delve into for the old character. At least that's the way I would do it. I probably wouldn't build a whole army from these. From tall people to short people, we have the Kharadron Overlords, and these are dwarf engineers, essentially. Maybe a little bit too steampunk for a lot of people's tastes, but again, you could still delve in and use things like the Code Right maybe as an engineer. I wouldn't lean too heavily on these, but again, if you want to go for a really strong engineer theme and alternative gyrocopters, then you've got some tools to do that here. It's all down to what you like personally. There's definitely some options. The thing is, with Age of Sigmar miniatures, are a lot more expensive as well, so you'd have to really, really love the theme to want to just delve into them, but they can help with certain gaps in ranges as well. And I think character miniatures for engineers are the first step, and then if you really want to go wacky with some alternative gyrocopters, then you could use some of these things. But again, let me know if there are other uses that you've thought of. Lumineth Realm-lords, and we have more elves, and I've seen these used a lot as alternative high elves, especially before the range was re-released, because the factions came out pretty slowly, and I think there are some really, really good options. Your overall spearmen are great. You can just say they come from a different part of the Elven Isles, and I think you can go a long way to just saying these are high elves. If you like the miniatures and you want to go with it, you go with it. I've seen some really, really nice conversions of them as well, where they're slightly toned down a little bit. They are clearly a version of high elves that work very, very nicely. So mix and match as you like. They still look Warhammer enough to me. A different kind of Warhammer, a more modern, refreshed Warhammer. They are Warhammer enough. So if you like high elves, want to replace some of the older range, especially the spearmen and things, you can really look into this and have a very different and cool looking army, and mix them with some of the Idoneth miniatures I've already mentioned, mix them with the more modern parts of the existing high elf range, and you'll find that you've got your bolt throwers there if you want to use them. Plenty of characters, plenty of options for cavalry as well, because we know that some of those miniatures are really, really old. Go to town with it, maybe stay away from the big sort of cow things or whatever they're supposed to be, but things like the Cenari, Cath, all are there. I'm sorry about pronunciation, I really don't follow this game. That's just a brilliant high elf mage miniature in my mind. Now onto a faction that definitely has its home with Warhammer and square bases, but is now named Seraphon. This is one of those ranges that's also had a really big update. A lot of these miniatures are new, slightly bigger than their older Warhammer versions, but still very, very usable. Very modern sculpts, very, very nice. So if you're a Lizardman fan, then you can get most of what you need here. I don't think there are many issues. Let me know if you're a Lizardman player and certain units are now missing from the game. I think most of the units had an update and have got lovely, lovely new sculpts. Of course, it makes it more expensive. And we also have the hope that those older sculpts, as often is the way, will be boxed up and repackaged and sold as a return to Warhammer the Old World at some point in the future. But if you love your Lizardmen, there's a lot of fantastic miniatures here, even terrain options for you there, and things like the Engine of the Gods. That's, as far as I know, that's the old miniature, is it? I don't know. Not that I had a metal one when I last had Lizardman, so I'm not sure if that's the 8th edition version or not anymore. There's so many miniatures, I lose track all the time. Lots of things you won't use because they're new miniatures that work with Age of Sigmar that are a bit larger now, but so much of the old stuff is there, or they've been updated and you can still use them. I mean, look at those skinks. Skinks are skinks at the end of the day, and you've got your Star Priests and your Sauruses. They're all there. This is where it gets controversial. Why am I even looking at Stormcast Eternals? Well, it's because they are miniatures made by Games Workshop, and if you like to convert things, you can often find alternative uses. You're not going to be going anywhere near the golden armoured boys. You're very unlikely to be. You still see the odd person commenting, could I use these as something? And personally, no, it's not really for me. But they have wonderful dragon miniatures. These are some of the best dragons that I think Games Workshop have ever done. I think they are amazing. I love them, and at some point in the future I will have some of these and have different mounts on them. So if you're looking for an alternative dragon miniature, then you've got them here, and some are quite good. You're getting 2 there for 80 quid. They're decent enough sized, and there will be nice mounts for many armies, so do check them out. As I said, ignore all the golden armor boys, but not entirely. Look at the Stormstrike chariot there. Take your golden boys off it and do a bit of conversion. You've got alternative chariots there. You could cover them in fur pelts and make alternative chaos chariots if you wanted something for a character rather than those older chaos chariots that exist at the moment. You want to change the mounts probably, but there are you could turn them into high elf chariots as well, because it's got that kind of more modern gleaming style look. So there are things you can delve into there, and things like the endless spells, you can convert those into spell markers for your games in Warhammer the Old World as well. Moving on to the last of the Order factions, and there's a lot already, as you can imagine. That's why I'm going at this pace and hoping this video still doesn't turn out to be too long. But we're moving on to Sylvaneth now. If you're a Wood Elf player, you're going to find a lot here for your use. Some things you definitely need, and some things that might be preferable if you don't like the metal tree men. And remembering the time of that launch and comments around it, a lot of people don't like the metal treeman. There's a lot of stuff here that's very new and you're not likely to use, and Alariel might have been around in 8th edition but isn't around at this time in this format, so there's a lot you're not going to use. But there are some funny alternatives here, even things like the Revenant Seekers and the Gosmid Archers. Those kind of flyers could be alternative harpies again, alternative chaos flyers. So if you're looking for chaos, you're not going to use a whole miniature like that, but maybe the bugs would be really useful. You could paint them up as some kind of flyers, alternative, painted as green as harpies and all kinds of chaos armies. And then you've got things like the Awakened Wildwood. Well, that's just terrain that you can use for Warhammer the Old World. It's absolutely fine. I've painted up some recently as part of a commission. You've got your endless spells as well, more things that might be useful as bits of terrain or to use as spell markers in the game. And then you've got a lot of tree spirits. Some things are a bit too Age of Sigmar now, some things not at all if you want to have a plastic version, including the Spirit of Durthu, which is the 8th edition plastic tree man sculpt. I painted one for myself. I like the old metal ones as well, but I really like that miniature. And it is an 8th edition miniature. It is a Warhammer miniature. It had a square base before it had an oval base. Yes, it was starting to edge into that Age of Sigmar styling, but they're good. And Dryads, There are no Dryad miniatures that are on the Warhammer the Old World range at the moment. The metal ones didn't come back, even though there were pictures and some images, and there is no official Dryad miniature for Warhammer the Old World at the moment. So you need to go over to Age of Sigmar and buy those plastic miniatures. A lot of old Warhammer there, they used to be on square bases, absolutely should be using it, and there's lots of alternatives. And that's just order. Let's move on to death. First up, we have Flesh Eater Courts, and if you're after any Strigoi themed, if you're after any crypt ghouls, any crypt horrors, Vargheist, Varghulf, Terrorgeists, you're going to find a lot of that stuff here. If you're a Vampire Counts fan, and Vampire Counts are pretty competitive as well in Warhammer the Old World, then you're probably already using these miniatures, and you'll recognise the miniatures as well if you were around in 8th edition. Some of them have been updated. There are a few remnants hanging around from those days, but there are some beautiful, beautiful sculpts. I think some of these are just Warhammer, whether it's in Age of Sigmar or whether it's in Warhammer the Old World, whether you put a square base on them or not. I think Warhammer ghouls are Warhammer ghouls, and that theme is carried over. And if you are making new ghoul miniatures now for Warhammer the Old World, then they'd probably look like this anyway. And who wouldn't want a zombie dragon looking like that? You've got the Carnal Throne there if you want to use some terrain. You've got endless spells that can be converted into spell markers or terrain as well. The old Terrorgeist miniature, Crypt Flayers, Crypt Ghouls. You're going to need these miniatures if you're playing Vampire Counts. Of course, we have Nighthaunt, and again, we just see the splitting of the old Vampire Counts faction into sub-factions in Age of Sigmar, so you have to dip in to them all. Lots of these have been updated, lots of them are new, but if you're into your ethereal kind of builds and you want wights and spirit hosts and banshees and wraiths and hex wraiths, even a black coach, which you will recognise again. I think, is that the 8th edition miniature? I think that might be the updated Age of Sigmar version now. Again, I don't follow this game quite as much as I should at times. I think the hex wraiths were definitely around in 8th edition. But these miniatures are all here. There's lots of new ones as well that you can use for some of the things that I've sort of shouted out or listed there. You won't be using Nagash in Warhammer the Old World at this time, but there's plenty of cool stuff there, and I've no doubt they're being used up and down the country and around the world in Vampire Counts armies at the moment. And it continues. We have the Soulblight Gravelords, which is probably the third of the old Vampire Count overall faction that's been split down. Of course, you've got your direwolves, you've got your vampires, you've got your wizards, necromancers, skeletons and zombies and Vargheists again, black knights, graveguard, direwolves, corpse carts, fellbats. It's all here. Some of it is old 8th edition and earlier stuff, and some of it is new and been updated, but it is here. It's one of the most complete ranges based on those 3 AOS ranges, and you can get most of the stuff you want with relatively new, nice looking miniatures, and you can have a very, very nice Vampire Counts army, which is maybe one of the reasons why it's not in the Old World at the moment. I'm not a big fan of the next part, the next range never quite clicked with me, the Ossiarch Bone Reapers. And if you're a fan of them in Age of Sigmar as well, that's cool. I'm not knocking them. I know my son really likes the look of them. For me, they just don't have much of that sort of residual memory of old Warhammer, and that's something I love very much. But I'm sure there are miniatures here that you'll be able to use, especially as alternative characters, but just the way they're formed, they're not formed from one single dead person. I think it's bones from all over the place, and it all looks a bit sci-fi for me. But there will be things you can use, again, like the endless spells. I'm sure you could use that. There might be some terrain you can use, and I'm sure there are other examples, and this is where you can help me out a little bit, because when I look at them, I don't have a lot of inspiration, but let me know. Obviously, I've seen quite a few people using the Mortek Crawler as a skull catapult, so that, you know, that's one option. Again, I still think it's a little bit weird. And that's the end of death. I whizzed through them relatively quickly there. There's a whole VC army there, no problem at all. So if you want to play your Vampire Counts, there's a beautiful range of miniatures and there's a pretty competitive set of rules at the moment. They're just, you can't use them at Warhammer World events. Other than that, you go for it. You need to buy some square bases, but you have a beautiful army. They're competitive, loads and loads of different build options. Just absolutely go for it. We move on now to the armies of Chaos, and there's loads here that you can use as well. Even while Chaos is now looking to be updated with the new Marauders, I think there's an awful lot here. But before we delve straight into the existing ranges, just got up for pre-order out mid-January or so is the new Maggotkin stuff, and we've just had the new Darkwater Warhammer Quest set as well, where some of this crosses over between the two, so it's worth taking a quick look at those. I'm mindful I've just done a video on which Darkwater miniatures you can use in Warhammer the Old World. So I'm going to whiz through this, but these aren't on the main website yet because they're not even fully up for pre-order yet at the time of making this video. So, but we got the Maggot King stuff, but you've got your Festus the Leech Lord, you've got your Sloven Knights, with just, you know, they're going to be using the Chaos Knights, aren't they? You've got Putrid Blight Kings. If you like Nurgle and you want alternative Warhammer the Old World Knights, Chaos Knights, you've got them, and the same here as well as Chaos Warriors, alternatives. Pestigores, these are different to the ones in Darkwater, so you mix them together. Again, you've got really, really nice Pestigore miniatures for use as allies in your Chaos armies or in your whole own Beast of Chaos army. And again, some of the characters that we saw in Darkwater, which I've already covered in that other video, which I'm not going to go through now, but lots of cool alternatives for these. Your Pox Wretches, again, which I've covered in that video, but other really cool stuff like this. If you're building a Chaos army of any kind, there's so much you can delve into here to really fill out your armies. There's the Hellforge Host Spearhead coming up as well, and the new Hellsmiths of Hashut are a perfect way of playing Chaos Dwarves. It makes it easier than it has been for years. Again, I've covered that in another video, and we'll touch on that again as we get to the main website in a moment. But let's work through the list methodically, and we'll start with Blades of Khorne. Again, whizzing through things, so do shout them out, but there's loads of different options. I've used the Realm Gore Ritualist and converted it slightly to use as a Chaos Sorcerer with a more Marauder type theme, and love it. And they don't necessarily have to be Khorne based, depending on how you paint them and what you trim off. They just look really Marauder like, I think. You've got your Flesh Hounds there are going to use. You might use some of that for spells and terrain, depending on how chaosy you want to be. Chaos is a bit slightly lower ebb in Warhammer the Old World. So some of these things you will need if you're playing Demons of Chaos, which are of course another legacy army at this time. They're still a bit in the background. Well, I'm sure we'll see them added to the game in the future as you move towards the Great War against Chaos, but they are all here if you need your Demons of Chaos army to be very cornate. And we got the Blood Reavers and the Blood Warriors if you want alternative Marauders. There's lots of alternative Marauders. We've got new Marauders now. We've got Dark Oath, which we'll come to a little bit later, but those are even more options. You've got your Bloodletters, again, you're going to need if you're playing Demons of Chaos. Plenty of hero options as well. It's a little bit rinse and repeat as we go through the different Chaos Gods depending on your flavour, but Disciples of Tzeentch, again, you've got character options, you've got demon options, things like your horrors. If you're playing Demons of Chaos, you're going to be needing these Screamers, Changelings, things that many of these will date back to previous editions of Warhammer Fantasy anyway. So if you're playing Demons of Chaos, you need to be looking at the Demons Age of Sigmar Rangers. You've got no other way of doing it unless you're using third-party miniatures, being things like the Zangors there. The Carrick Acolytes, they make, again, another alternative Marauder if you want something that's a little bit more refined, a little bit more Tzeentch. I prefer them a little bit more down and dirty, but they are cool miniatures and cool options. And of course, all of your big beasties, your Chaos Lords, your Sorcerers, your Spawn, you'll still need to dig into this range. Moving swiftly on to the Hedonites of Slaanesh. So, Slaanesh, much of the same. I'm going to be repeating myself here, but you've got alternative character miniatures that fit that god's aesthetic a little bit more. Some really cool chariots and things as well. You've got your demon options and loads of stuff again if you're playing Demons of Chaos. Just some really, really stunning miniatures if you want to add a little bit of extra theme. I think the Lord of Pain is awesome. I quite like the idea of maybe using him as a Lord in a Marauder based army where the rest of them are all quite low armoured looking like Marauders, but he's clearly had a few more gifts from Chaos and he's leading the whole army. That's so cool. I might have to buy him to stick in a chariot or something. Love that idea. But you can see lots of options here if you like your Slaaneshi style of stuff. You can put them in your Chaos armies or even your Demons of Chaos armies, and again, more useful in the spells, converting into spell markers for the Old World. And the last Chaos God, of course, we have Maggot King of Nurgle. And we touched on some of this with the new releases now, but we've got a lot of the old releases. Many of them old Warhammer Fantasy miniatures as well. So you've got your great unclean ones and lots of gross, ugly demons, including your drones and things, and your Nurglings and your Poxbringers. It's all here if you want to play Nurgle as a Demons of Chaos list, or if you want to have Nurgle-themed characters to go in a Warriors of Chaos list, or even a Warriors Marauders list. There's a wonderful Harbinger of Decay miniature. Again, another thematic idea of him in a small unit of Chaos Knights leading a Marauder army. And I just love that idea of that single Chaos Warrior leading a whole army of sort of regular Marauders and things. Just really, really cool. But again, lots of stuff here. Much of it would have been available with a square base at some point in the past. So stick it back on one. Slaves to Darkness, the last of your Chaos Warriors, Chaos Marauders type theme here. And again, there's some brilliant stuff here that I think you can use in both your Warriors of Chaos lists, but then also your Marauders as well. And I've used plenty of Dark Oath as Marauders in my own army. They're really, really cool if you want to do Berserkers and make them slightly different from your new Marauder kit. Loads of cool stuff here. But you know, you've got Bellicor here if you want a Demon Prince. You've got, again, some of the Sorcerer models, the Dark Oath Chieftain, again, something else that look really cool in a Chariot leading a Marauder army. That's another idea I've got. I might use him. Just some really, really fun miniatures. Chaos Lord, they're still pictured on a square base. Lots of cool stuff. Some of it was old fantasy miniatures, some not. Dark Oath Chieftain on Warstead, again, another really cool leader for a new Marauder themed army. And then you've got your Chaos Warriors. Now these are slightly larger than the Warhammer the Old World ones, but they're more modern. But the aesthetic is almost the same. You can get them on square bases. You just have to be a little bit careful how you rank them up. But we had that problem back in the day with fantasy anyway. So lots of stuff here you could use if you don't like the old plastics. There's lots of rumours about new plastics on the way. That Gorbeast Chariot is also available in a 2 set with a different shaped base because it's the same miniature. There's one of the rare examples now of how the different games share some ranges, but you've got your Spawn here again. Lots of stuff, no doubt you'll have seen much of it before, but even things like the Dark Oath Fell Riders there, which are a really new kit that people were using as Marauder Horse, and we've just had new Marauder Horse. But if you're after something that's slightly different, maybe to represent the Half Guard, then those would be really, really fantastic for them. We've touched on Hell's Myths of Hashut, and again, this is another one of those where I've done a video talking about what's useful and what might need to be converted. So I don't want to repeat myself too much, but I'll really skim over it and say, if you like Chaos Dwarves, you've got the option here of having a Chaos Dwarf army, and it's probably the easiest it ever has been to get all of the miniatures on the table, apart from when they were out the first time. Yes, you're going to do some conversions, maybe. They're adding to it all the time. There's a few more things that are going to come out for this, but most of your core units can be covered with this. Now for a race whose existence is denied in the lore in many instances, and kind of is at the moment in Warhammer the Old World. Skaven don't exist in Warhammer the Old World, apart from being a legacy faction. They are too busy burrowing underground and rebuilding, and people have forgotten all about them. But they are a range who have had a recent update. In fact, the last edition of Age of Sigmar, they were part of the starter army, so a lot of the sculpts have had an update. There's very few of the old range still in, and that gives us two options really. Is you find the old range on eBay and keep your fingers crossed that they're going to return to Warhammer the Old World with that old range, which I think is everyone's hope, or you could buy a lot of the new miniatures, and I've got a lot sitting there waiting for time to do the project, and they are very, very nice. Again, slightly larger, but you can still fit them on bases and get them to rank up. And of course there are things you recognise from before. That Hellpit Abomination was originally sold with a square base, so make sure you use it if you want to. Lots of cool scenery options, but there is everything you would need to create a Skaven army available in this range. Of course, it's priced with Age of Sigmar pricing, which makes it a little bit more expensive. Those Plague Monks, those are the old Warhammer Fantasy ones. So some of those things are the same. The Plague Priest on Furnace and the Screaming Bell, I believe, are the 8th edition miniatures. I don't think they've done anything other than repackage them with the oval bases. So there are remnants of the old fantasy range there, including the Night Runners, which oddly didn't get an update. Sure, that'll come in the future, but the Doomwell, again, that came on a square base. Everything you need is here to play Skaven if you love Skaven. I don't think they're super competitive. It wouldn't put me off because I just think they look wonderful aesthetically. I just haven't had the time because the release pace has just been so busy. But they are all here. So if you're returning to the game and you played Skaven before and you just love them and you're not too worried about them being the most competitive army out there, then they are all here. They're re-released, and there's some beautiful, beautiful miniatures to make your army from. You'll be pleased to know we're getting towards the end of the video now. Hopefully you've taken lots of notes for all the comments, for all the things I've forgotten and particular uses I've forgotten. But before we go, let's cover destruction. We're starting off with Gloomspite Gitz. And again, if you are a fan of orcs and goblins, then you're probably already using some of this range. In fact, much of it was old fantasy, some of it 8th edition. It might even be a few remnants from before. But if you're a user of squigs in many flavours, including herds and hoppers, you're going to need this. The old spider riders from 7th edition, I think, are here. You want alternative fanatics, they're here. The Ragnarok is the 8th edition miniature. But if you want more updated wolf riders, then you can use the Snarlfang riders. They're more expensive, but they're definitely newer miniatures. And then things like your plastic trolls are all here. Yes, the Troggoth stuff is the bigger ones, the dank holds, etc., are brand new, and you might not use them unless you want some kind of alternative troll hag. But your rock guts were your 8th edition plastic trolls, and you're going to need them unless you want the old metal ones. Moo Clan shooters, they're just night goblins. You've got your spells that might be useful, and your Loon Shrine that might be useful for terrain. So again, some more fanatics there, plastic ones rather than your metal ones. Moon Clan Snabbers, again, more night goblins. Fellwater Troggoths, well, they used to be called River Trolls and still are in the old world. So these things are here. You're probably delving into them already if you're an existing player. If you're coming back to the game, there's a lot available old school wise in the Warhammer the Old range, but you really might want to dip into this other stuff. The chariots are really expensive here, but if you're going for a chariot-based list and you want a character on them, then something like the Snarlboss and Warwheeler there, I would look at that as my general maybe, or a character on a chariot, and then maybe use some of the Warhammer the Old world, the older style ones, as your normal chariots to really sort of differentiate between them. Now, the next faction is Ogor Mawtribes, and this is something there's a lot of rumours about whether they're going to return to Warhammer the Old World. They definitely geographically are closer to Cathay, which gives them a little bit of something to maybe fight against or with at times when there are ogres in the Cathay list. And also there are lots of rumours about this having a big refresh at some point in 2026, and if it does, maybe the older miniatures will then be released to the Old World team to bring back on square basis. But obviously, this range as it is just full of old miniatures from Warhammer Fantasy. There's the odd new thing, but most of it is either 8th edition or previous, and they're just all old fantasy, or nearly all old fantasy. You've got some Warcry stuff that's different, but that's a way of getting gorgeous that aren't metal. But your Gluttons, that's old fantasy, right back from when they were released. I think it was 6th edition, wasn't it? End of 6th edition. Your Bloodpelt Hunter is different, is new as a character from one of the games, but again, cool alternative. But your Tyrant, again, was an 8th edition miniature. Your Morpop, nice bit of terrain if you want it. The rest is all 8th edition stuff. Your Scrap Launcher, your Iron Blaster, your Thunder Tusk. This is all from the Ogre 8th edition release, their second ever army book. And it's all here. It's a legacy army. The list is there. I don't know how competitive it is really. I'm sure it has its moments, but it's all here. I've got a few of these. I've got a small list, but all the miniatures are here should you need them. And they are very much Warhammer Fantasy. No aesthetic problems here. The Noblars are hilarious, and the whole range is here right now. So if there are rumours of a refresh, maybe go and grab them now if you want to play ogres, because you might find some just disappear altogether. With Orruk Warclans, we return to some of our bigger green-skinned fellows in the Orc and Goblin tribes army list. And some of these are completely new and probably don't fit the aesthetic for Warhammer the Old World or square-based fantasy, unless you really like that aesthetic and you want to go for it. So stuff like the new Hobgrots Slitters are probably more in place as hobgoblins in your Chaos Dwarf armies rather than in your Orc and Goblin tribes armies. But all of your old Orruk Warclans stuff is old fantasy stuff, and you can still use it. Some good terrain options there as well. Again, Hobgrots I think are more as hobgoblins, and some of these new goblins, they're very, very cool, maybe used for a character, but I maybe wouldn't lean into them any more than that, because I quite like the aesthetic of old orcs and goblins in fantasy. And the new ones I think are absolutely stunning, but they just don't do it for me in the same way. So apart from a character here or there, I would probably avoid them. But you've got stuff like the Gordak, the Fist of Gork, the old cabbage model. If you want that, run that in your army, you're going to need that old 8th edition miniature. And the Gore Grunters and the Brutes there, I believe, or at least have the same aesthetic as the old 8th edition miniatures. Again, I lose track of which ones were early AOS and which ones were old fantasy. The Weird Knob was definitely old fantasy for sure, and I'm sure there are many, many other examples of that as well. Last but not least, and a range that I've just dipped into myself, and we have the Sons of Behemat. These, of course, are your giants in Age of Sigmar, and we have there the Spearhead. It's the old Warhammer Giant, not the really old one, but it's the standard Warhammer Giant from 7th and 8th edition. That classic kit, and it is brilliant. And my son has one in an Orc and Goblin army, and I'm sure many people with giants are using these. And then we have the Mega Gargants, and this is one kit now, unless you buy directly from Games Workshop. I think even if you do, it's just the one box, and it's the King Brod on the cover, but it does all of those different builds. And I've just done a bit of a mix of a build myself to use as a Bone Grinder Giant in my Renegade Crowns list. It's slightly shorter than the Forge World Bone Grinder, a little bit cheaper, and if you buy them from third parties, you can get them for around the £100 mark, which is loads cheaper than the resin Forge World Bone Grinder Giant. So really useful there. But that really is the end of it now. I'm not going to show you any more miniatures. I've probably missed something off, and I'm sure you'll tell me if I have. But it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to go through pretty much the whole range, and it's a bit of a thought exercise really about how you could use some of those to fill gaps, to give you alternatives if you want to have plastic miniatures rather than metals that sometimes still exist for Warhammer the Old World, or those gaps in the rosters where there's just nothing official for it at all at the moment. And please do get involved in the comments. Tell me your favourite alternatives, your favourite miniatures, or things you think, oh, I'm going to buy these because I'm going to be using them as this or that, because there will be lots I haven't talked about. I could turn each faction almost into a video by itself, and this is already probably too long and I haven't even edited it yet, but people have requested it. I've delivered it. Hopefully it was useful in one way or another. And I hope you have all had a wonderful Christmas and a new year. And this being the first video on the channel for the new year, there's going to be lots more, a bit like this, but lots of the normal stuff as well. Loads of hobby and painting, reviewing of many game systems, but also a lot of Warhammer the Old World as well. It does definitely take up a good 75% of the channel now, and I'm unapologetic about that. Warhammer the Old World is my favourite game. I love it so much. But there is lots on there. I'm a painter, and if you're interested in learning about painting and things, there should be lots on the channel to help you out as well. If you enjoyed this video and it's the first time you watched me, do check out some of the other videos. You might find there's even more stuff there that you like, and as I said, there's definitely different stuff than me just talking at you on the camera. If you've been watching my videos for a while and you really like to support me, please do check out my Patreon. It's just the best way of supporting me. Check out the Discord as well and join there. There's lots of fun things going on there at the moment, including a monthly hobby pledge thing where you pledge what you're going to do for your hobby for the month and see if you achieve it at the end. Really simple, really fun. And if you're a patron member for the top 3 tiers, you can also earn badges for doing that. Physical pin badges, I know, really 1980s. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.